Hello, my name is Jakki Mohr, and this will be a series of 5 recordings on how emerging technologies are operating in today's business environment. For each recording, I'll expect you to know the basic concepts and the underlying detail about those concepts. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Emerging technologies are filled with quite a bit of promise, but also quite a bit of peril. And if we take one quote from the Harvard Business Review about big data, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, this quote could be indicative of many types of emerging technologies. Many companies have not been able to consistently derive business value from their investments in big data, AI, and machine learning. And I've selected 2 cartoons that embody both the hype regarding this upside potential, as well as the peril. What you see is that with respect to big data, companies have viewed it as sort of a magical flying unicorn that will magically solve all their business problems. Yet on the other side, these technologies require tremendous investments, and companies are hoping to get a return on investment from those expenditures. Yet when the ROI doesn't materialize, those investments still need to be accounted for, and that's where the ROI becomes an IOU. I call this technology humor. Emerging technology is characterized by quite a bit of jargon, things like Web3, for example, blockchain, and lots of acronyms such as NFTs, digital twins. In addition, emerging technologies have a lot of hype surrounding them, including inflated expectations about what they can deliver. We see oftentimes that from a venture capital perspective, there's a rush to invest in startups that are developing these emerging technologies. Yet from a business perspective, who is going to be adopting and purchasing things like artificial intelligence solutions, there's a lack of a clear value proposition, despite having many possible use cases. Again, with something like ChatGPT-3, what we see is there are use cases in marketing, in writing code. Yet the fact is, it's very difficult to unleash that potential. In addition, emerging technologies require a supporting industry ecosystem. Think about electric vehicles. Unless there are sufficient charging stations, the right sort of tax and registration requirements for road infrastructure, which is typically paid by an oil or gas tax, as well as issues related to repairs and roadside service, there are quite a few hesitancies for customers to buy those emerging technologies. We see a lack of legal and ethical frameworks when we're talking about things like genomics or nanotechnology that have environmental implications. That would be an example. And typically we see a lot of sci-fi fascination around some of these emerging technologies that further contribute to both the hype, the upside potential, as well as this dystopian view that we might see arising from a society driven by technology. On this set of recordings, you'll see that I'll be covering 4 specific components, and today what we'll be talking about is how do we define emerging technology in terms of innovation and what those common characteristics are that those emerging technologies share. Recording number 2 will go into some detail on those characteristics that is really important to understand. Recording number 4 will focus on some classic models of emerging technology to predict its adoption and diffusion. And then the final video will be talking about this important concept called network effects that drives a lot of emerging technology in terms of the value customers will receive. Innovation is defined as something that is new. Innovative means not seen before. So from a business perspective, this would be something like a new idea or a new device or a new method of solving problems. And ultimately, customers, whether it's B2C, business to consumer customers, or B2B, business to business customers, purchasers of new innovations, new technologies, are looking for better solutions to solve their problems. So the heart of emerging technologies are these development of solutions that proactively anticipate and solve customer needs, whether those customer needs are articulated or latent and unknown. There are many typologies of innovation, and I'm going to discuss a couple of them here that we'll see rolled out through the remaining videos. The first typology of innovation goes on a continuum ranging from incremental on the one hand to radical or breakthrough on the other hand. Incremental innovations are characterized by minor modifications of existing products and services. So these often are referred to as feature tweaking innovations, where if we have a telecommunications service, we might offer a new 5G plan or additional data or a faster download speeds. And sometimes we refer to this as adding bells and whistles. On the other hand, radical or breakthrough innovations require major changes in how customers use the product or the services. So an example of this would be technology and software used for financial services. And you'll see some of the images that I have here accompany the fact that when we talk about the ecosystem for online or digital payments, it requires customers to download digital wallets. It requires that they link their banking or their credit cards to some of the apps that they're using. And newer generations might not consider these major changes, but the fact is, if you're in the banking industry, this does require a major change in how you interact with your customers. So one of the key ideas behind these definitions is to think more in terms of the customer knowledge around these innovations. For incremental innovations, customers have no problem evaluating the price-benefit ratio of the feature tweaking, and they're looking for good deals. For radical innovations, customers may experience hesitancy simply because it's unfamiliar and unknown how they would use it compared to the known and familiar solutions that are currently guiding their lives. A second typology of innovation is what is known as product innovation, which are tangible things or services. Services are intangible, but again, if it's a product, and I'm using air quotes here around product and service, it's essentially what does the company use to earn revenue. So if we think about something that's not technology related and we think about a service, we think about getting our hair cut or getting our nails done. Those are intangible services, and the fee for service model is really clear that customers pay to have the service performed. Process innovations are quite different from this. Process innovations refer to the operations or methods in terms of how things are done. So an easy example would be when we think about wireless routers and network switches made by Cisco. We know that they sell routers and switches in the marketplace, that is their product and their revenue model. But you know that they also have quite a number of software processes that guide their salespeople in terms of how to optimize the number of routers and switchers that a client will require to optimize their network. So that operation of optimizing the network solution would be considered a process innovation. Similarly, when Tesla came in the market, we know that they sell electric vehicles, but they had to invent a number of process innovations in their factory that themselves could be innovations that would be marketed to other companies. And that would be manufacturing or process innovations. A third type of innovation is what's referred to as a business model innovation, which is the method by which a firm earns revenue. So we know frequently that customers expect to pay money for a certain product or service. But increasingly, we see things like software as a service, where we pay a monthly fee to access a digital product. We see subscriptions as a business model, which essentially is a renewing, recurring revenue stream for a company. We see a subsidy as a business model, where when we sign up for a telecom service from AT&T or T-Mobile, we expect to get some sort of a subsidy on the actual phones that we use that service on. And business model innovations are increasingly important in the world of emerging technology. So these are just some straight up definitions, and it's really important to understand that each type of innovation has unique challenges associated with it from a customer adoption perspective. Okay, so here again, we see a little more detail on what are incremental innovations versus what are radical innovations. And because emerging technology generally falls on this more radical end of the spectrum, there are quite a few more challenges when customers decide to adopt them, and therefore when businesses decide to market them. All right, and a final slide on this continuum of incremental versus radical. There are some terminology and vocabulary associated with incremental versus radical that I think it's important for people to understand. Radical innovation oftentimes is invented in the lab. So we call this lab science, and oftentimes we see companies spend quite a bit of money on R&D. For instance, if you're Intel, they're working on quantum computing right now to figure out how to actually make that work. And it's considered in the lab in the sense that it's not fully refined and ready for customer use cases. I'll do superior functional performance over the old technology in the next set of videos when I talk about technology life cycles. For radical or breakthrough innovations, there are many, many use cases that can be used for these emerging technologies. So if we go back to ChatGPT, for example, it can be used for marketing. It can be used for writing code. And these various use cases mean that from a company perspective, they need to figure out where's the best market opportunity for us to pursue. Essentially, new technology it opens up new markets that didn't previously exist. And this is oftentimes referred to as a supply side market, meaning customers didn't ask for quantum computing, but here it is, it's going to be available. And companies refer to that as technology push, when they're trying to push the technology out in the market, in contrast to the left-hand side of the framework, where you see for incremental innovations, customers oftentimes are articulating, hey, I'd like to have some different kind of colors for my iPhone, or I'd like to have some different feature combinations for my telecommunications service. And each of these are referred to as customer pull. The final slide on our common characteristics of emerging technologies to wrap up this initial recording is that all emerging technologies do share a set of common characteristics. And you see the 5 of them listed here that we will be addressing as we explore emerging technologies. Market uncertainty captures the idea that customers oftentimes experience fear, uncertainty, and doubt, known as the acronym FUD, in making decisions about which technologies to adopt and when to adopt them and how much money to spend on them and how long will it take before they become proficient in using them. And this customer or market uncertainty means that customers are willing to delay adopting new things. They take a wait and see attitude because they're concerned that they're going to spend money and it's not going to be viable. In addition, market uncertainty means that customers are unclear about whether there will be standards that ensure that when they buy, say, one electric vehicle like a Nissan Leaf, will they be able to find chargers on our interstate system that allow them to charge the Nissan Leaf? And the fact is, this interoperability, which means my product will plug and play with your product for compatibility, consumers need this to reassure them. And once consumers find out that, oh, there are 3 different plug types for electric vehicles, Tesla has its own proprietary plug architecture and charging stations, and those charging stations are not usable by people with the Nissan Leaf or a Chevy Bolt. That causes concerns both from a customer perspective. Well, where am I going to be able to charge? If I can't charge at every station, how will I sort that out? But also, which companies are actually going to build out the charging infrastructure? The lack of interoperability or compatibility means that they're only going to capture whatever percent of the market that product like Tesla has in the industry. And so when we talk about third-party charging networks, it's going to divide the market opportunity for those companies. Of course, customers are concerned about unintended consequences. These are negative things that happen when we don't expect them to. So for example, with ChatGPT-3, oftentimes it is wrong. The facts are erroneous, and that problem with facts is an unintended consequence. And as a result of all of these forms of customer ambiguity, the companies that are marketing and commercializing emerging tech, very difficult for them to forecast demand, to build up their internal HR staffing, manufacturing, distribution. And that's why one of our later frameworks will be looking at this pace of adoption, sometimes known as uptake, in order to help companies understand how do we model forecasts around all of these sources of uncertainty. Technology uncertainty refers to the technology risk itself. So how do we know whether the technology that I'm investing in, how do I know it's going to perform as promised? And probably the best illustration of this are some of the emerging technologies in the space business, such as SpaceX, for example. We want to make sure that before we pay our money to be one of those space tourism customers, that those technologies, that those spaceships are going to function as promised, because the downside risk is so great, it's essentially death. In addition, we see a lot of uncertainty in terms of technical risk over how long will it take for new product development. When we talk about things like quantum computing, for example, we've been exploring this for quite some time, but the fact is it's been very difficult to crack the nut of how that works. And then unknown glitches, again, mistakes are things that we don't expect. And we see lots of these unintended consequences, again, that companies need to take responsibility for. One of them might be characterized when we have genetically modified organisms in the environment. How are we going to protect our food sources against those if, in fact, they do end up causing problems? A third source of uncertainty for emerging tech is what's called competitive volatility. We know in business strategy that it's critically important to do an analysis of the competition, but it's extremely difficult to do this when new technologies mean there are going to be new competitors that we don't even know who they might be. And when they change the business model in terms of how revenue is earned, it's extremely difficult. So it's quite important that incumbents in an industry not be myopic when they only look at competitors as companies that already exist in the marketplace. Because the fact is, Tesla didn't exist prior to its invention of the Tesla Roadster. And we're going to see new competitors come into the market when we talk about something like computer chips NVIDIA didn't exist when Intel and AMD were the big competitors in that industry. So incumbents need to be really careful that when new technologies are being developed, that they're not myopic, because they can be essentially outcompeted and they can become irrelevant. So I'll conclude the first video recording here with an understanding of these various characteristics that all emerging technologies share. And what we'll be doing in the next video is we'll be looking at some specific strategy tools that emerging technology companies use to understand this competitive environment. Thank you.